It says turn on subtitles. The subtitles are actually not very good when I see them from time to time. But I was wondering, are the subtitles available on YouTube once the video is uploaded? Do you know?
Yeah, I think YouTube has like an auto subtitle system where it tries to um, analyze the spoken words, but it's pretty hit or miss. Like if someone didn't speak English at all, I doubt they would be able to follow with just the subtitles. And then there's people translating, so you can kind of volunteer to translate stuff into your own language, but I don't think many people do that.
Ah, I was looking for the simple thing, and that is to con- convert some of the talks into text so that it could be published, edited and published as a unit.
Yeah. I think I actually know some people who might know a lot about this. I can ask them because I have a couple of friends who are in computer linguistics, and that's basically what they do, like working on text to speech, for example, and the other way around. I can give them a call sometime and ask what the easiest way to go about that would be.
All right. Well, we have now about 100 videos on YouTube,
Yeah,
95 or something.
you're being very productive.
Uh, Let us say that Skype is being very productive. It's all in the machinery. And in fact, I'm thinking about it. Yes, there in the beginning, back in 2016, especially, I think that it was in March of 2016 is when we opened the YouTube channel. And we had a couple of students who would be able to have their cell phone on and recording the audio
Mm. Yeah.
while he was on the computer. And so that's why there's those audios that have a picture of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa or some old photo, is because that's the way they're doing it. But then that kind of stopped, and it wasn't until a few months ago that we came across that, Skype's new version has an actual way of doing the recording. And the best part is that the recording is done on Skype's computers, and then we have to
Yeah.
download it from them. Because if it's done on either one of the local computers, then that computer will surely hang up because it just doesn't have the processing power to
Yeah.
manage two different video streams at the same time. So, and in fact, that was what was wrong with various programs that we would try to use. We tried 4 or 5, uh, and didn't find one that was actually usable.
Mm.
But now that we have the Skype, that's where it is. All right. So when you talk about the productivity, the question is, well, what happened to that more than a year or almost 2 years of videos that didn't ever happen?
Yeah. I mean, I still think the main benefit is in the one-on-one conversation, though, because listening to a Dhamma talk or listening or even watching a video of a Dhamma talk is just not the same as actually talking to someone. It's just not as effective, I think, at least for me.
Um, you've actually tapped onto something that the Buddha Sangha has known about all along. And that in fact, that's exactly what the intention was, between Achan Po and myself when we decided to go online. The video quality, though, has the quality that these one-on-one kind of talks and discussions um, can be put on YouTube, hopefully going to last for a long time into further generations. Perhaps these things will be more used and useful than they are being now, because nobody knows about them much. And I suppose, in a way, it's only the brave who are actually going to call.
In what way would one have to be brave?
Well, it's a whole lot easier just to see it on YouTube. Because I'm known to give pop quizzes from time to time, for instance.
Oh no. I'm gonna open up Wikipedia in the background to be prepared for anything.
Actually, the things that I look up on Wikipedia that I find there are things that I didn't know. And so if it's on Wikipedia, I probably won't ask you about it. The kind of Dhamma that I ask about is the kind of Dhamma I don't think has gotten into literature yet, other than by way of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, and that he lived at such a time so that the technology just was not there. No one with a cell phone followed Bhikkhu Buddhadasa around all the time like would be possible today.
Yeah.
So many of the things that happened. Also, Achan Po had a style. He was a master of one-liners. And I think that other teachers taught that way. But his one-liners were always lined up, I think, with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's, so that whatever was going on with me, Achan Po would be there to sort of kick me in the butt from time to time. It was a really excellent way. And so calling in on Skype doesn't quite have that quality as if we were at the temple together.
Yeah.
But it does have the quality of that it makes the Dhamma real. It makes the Dhamma human, because it's real people talking about real issues.
Yeah.
And in fact, the most fundamental, most basic, most difficult to deal with issues. We only take the very best issues.
Yeah.
Questions like, who am I? And what's the nature of God? What's the nature of the universe? What's it all about, Alfie? What's it like to be dead? The hell with that. What's it like to be alive already? The really heavy questions.
Yeah.
But all of those point down to a deeper question, and that deeper question is, why do we suffer? Because we can recognize we suffer, and we suffer needlessly. Why can't humanity just sit down and be happy together?
Yeah.
And so once we can start wrestling with that very basic question, which all boils down then to dukkha, dukkha nirodha, or the Four Noble Truths. Once we start going deep into there, we start to sing the Margaritaville song.
I don't think I know that one.
I'll
have to look it up after this.
It's on YouTube. So you can actually just YouTube Margaritaville song right now.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I know that one.
It ends with the guy recognize that all of the stuff that's gone wrong with him down on his Mexican vacation is his own fault.
Mm.
And the line is, some people say there's a woman to blame, but I know it's my own damn fault. That's kind of the end of the song.
Yeah.
And that's what, but when we recognize that, we start to recognize it at a very, very deep level. Because if we do, when we recognize it as our own fault, that is the key to how to get out of it. It is up to me.
Yeah.
But that's the basic teaching of the second noble truth, is what's the cause of suffering? Here, this is the cause of suffering.
Yeah.
And that's what gives rise to that Margaritaville song. And some people have struggles with that. But in fact, it's liberating. Because that's in fact the step that needs to be taken out of being a victim into taking responsibility for oneself to become the lion. And a lot of people don't make that step.
Yeah.
If anybody can listen to these videos and make that one step in life, then these videos are successful.
Yeah. I think I've had like a small realization about that because I think the first thing we ever talked about was I think this same point where I think one of the ways you put it was you notice you've fallen into the ditch again and you just happily climb out again and get back on the road, like pull yourself up,
Yes.
dust yourself off, get going again.
Yes.
And that kind of joyful, diligent, relaxed attitude,
Mm-hmm.
the correct attitude, I think that's the first thing we ever talked about. And I think I noticed that whenever I'm on that and when I manage to do that, my practice goes really well. And then I kind of forget about that again. And I start to get into judging and like self-judging and self-criticizing and planning and getting attached to results and all these things. And then I have to kind of remember that's not what I want to do. And then my practice kind of stalls out because that doesn't work. And then I notice that and I have to go back to the more like focusing more on joy, focusing on the correct attitude. And whenever I do that, my practice goes really well.
That's how it is. I think that if there is anything, any ingredient that's missing, absolutely just flat out missing, like with wrong translation or it fell off the back of the truck, I don't know what happened, but somehow Western Buddhism did not get the message about joy.
Yeah.
And they need it more than anything, any other culture, because of all of the suffering Jesuses that they've been hanging on crosses for centuries.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there are a few Christians who like to have him float off up into the air, but the Catholics are very quick to grab him by the feet and come back and nail him on that cross. There's a whole quality of feeling guilty and suffering and staying an underdog and all of that that's built right into the religion. And in fact, I can see that in the way that evangelicals are behaving in America now as they're going through what some people are calling their death throes. But you can see that the culture that we're living in supports people remaining victims.
Yeah.
And so much of the culture supports that. We're all born as victims. Very, very few kids are born to be real lions because they've
Yeah.
got a mission. For instance, and sometimes it happens well, and sometimes it happens really badly. Caligula is probably the worst example of all of someone who was trained for power.
Yeah.
But they can be trained for power, and that also they can. I think that it would have to be a spiritual journey, a spiritual experience that may or may not include martial arts, because there's a lot of body that's built into it. A lion has to be a lion because he knows that he's a lion, and part of that has to be demonstrated. In other words, I have to know that I can do something.
Yeah.
In order to feel like I have conquered it.
Yeah.
And so this idea that you're talking about of falling back into that old method of striving and failing is actually quite well known in psychology, but they only look at it at the extreme examples, because that's where the psychologists, especially those that are working in a nut house or something, they're only looking at the really extreme examples of it. But a more cultural psychologist would recognize how widespread it is, and an industrial psychologist will look for ways to exploit it.
Yeah.
And in fact, they do. Edward Bernays is possibly the best example. Did you actually look up that Century of the Self?
No, I actually didn't. But I actually, I listened to some podcast where they talked about Bernays as well, and it's like, the more I learn about marketing and PR people, the more I dislike them, to put it mildly.
Actually, don't dislike them. Recognize the skills that they have. Because you need those very skills yourself in order to not be under their spell.
Yeah, it's very manipulative.
Yes, you need to see how you've been manipulated your whole life so that you can stop. That's the freedom. The freedom is to see the manipulation built into the culture. Now, the Buddha talked about this as Sila Bhatta Paramasa. This is actually the second of the 10 fetters, the Rupa and the Arupa fetters. Some people think of them as lower and higher, and generally we think of them also as things that need to be done first, and then things that we see along the way, and recognize. The more we recognize them, the more we deal with them. But we can start right with the second noble truth. And that second noble truth is lobha, moha, dosa, greed, ill will, and delusion. Now, if we look at it in the way of the path, we see, oh, well, the first thing about the path is that one becomes a sotapan, and that's released through knowledge. In other words, the whole path of Sotapan is the path of knowledge. In fact, in the second sutta, Sabha, that's the name of it. And that is the 3 fetters that are eliminated by seeing clearly, by seeing directly. And so what that actually means is that the 4th and the 5th fetter are the rest of the second noble truth. But until we see what it is and see what it's like and understand it correctly, etc., we're not ever going to be able to rid ourselves of greed and ill will. Not so long as there's delusion there.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Because every religion recognizes greed and ill will, but they don't know how to manage it. Some of them say, oh, you got to take Jesus as your savior.
Yeah, as if that's going to do anything.
Has its own layers of suffering, I imagine, because the hope is not ever fulfilled.
Yeah.
Bringing, in fact, in fact, the correct thing to happen is a train wreck, which is often called the dark night of the soul, when people figure out, hey, I've been lied to. A
Yeah.
lot of people never come to that conclusion.
Yeah. I think I'm
All right.
about ready for that. Feels like it.
Well, that's why on the Buddhist path, we're going to say, oh no, we're not going to give you jobs to do until you have the skills to do those jobs.
Hmm.
And that's why there's labels built into it of Sotapan, Sotagami, Anagami, Arahat, is because one set of skills that you develop are then needed to manage and master the next level.
Yeah.
And that we're not ever going to learn how to manage feelings until we learn how.
Yeah. I've
So,
actually
go ahead.
I've I've actually this is kind of some experience that I had that I think fits in really nicely here that I kind of wanted to bring up.
Okay.
Um, and it's to do with purifications. Um, because I was trying out more of a. So usually I'm practicing in Chuladasa's method, which is more of a samatha practice. Um, but I've been trying some more vipassana methods, um, and I've been having what I think are probably purifications come up, and I was wondering what your take on that process is.
Rather than generalizing and tossing them into a basket and presenting me a basket with a label on it, why don't you take these items out of the basket and present them one at a time?
Yeah. So um, the practice I did today was I did my usual um, kind of samatha practice in the beginning, and then but I tried to really um, go easy on the effort. So to just very lightly try to keep attention on the breath and not force it to stay there, but just very lightly, like almost inviting it to stay there without any pressure. And then I kind of tried to really drop into an awareness of the entire body and just see what comes up, and the to really release tension that I find in the body. So I would find some tension like in my neck and shoulder area, and then just like gently breathe into it and sit with it until it dissolved on its own. And then I did that kind of just having the body in awareness and seeing if there was any tension that I could sit with. And then this tension in my stomach came up, and it was like this real, like as if I was sick, like as if I had to throw up. And these, um, yeah, it was a really unpleasant feeling. Even like racing heartbeat, some um, quicker breathing, and it was kind of unsettling. So what I tried to do was to just sit with it and kind of let it wash over me and kind of let it dissolve itself. So I think of that as a purification.
What were you purified of?
I don't know. It was very unspecific. I didn't have any thoughts or memories of some situation, but um, it felt like I don't know if that's the correct word, but the adrenaline response, where it's kind of like the fight or flight thing, where you get like this feeling in your extremities as well, where it's kind of like, I don't know if that's like heightened blood pressure or something, but it feels like when I'm really nervous, like about to go into the boss's office for some difficult conversation. That kind of feeling came up.
Okay, I was about to ask you that, but you've already answered it in the sense of this experience you had in meditation possibly is like other experience that you've had, and you've just said yes. You going into the boss's office, all right?
Yeah.
So, something perhaps triggered, and in fact, it may have been a thought or a flash that happened so quickly that you didn't even see what it was. But something went by and triggered a nerve that sprung that stuff right out of the back part of the brain there. The cerebellum is the kind of place where that stuff is stored. Okay, so now you know that that stuff is stored and can be triggered. The question is, what can you do to trigger it? And what can you do to not trigger it? Or if it happens to trigger by itself, how can you put the jack in the box back in the box before it pops out and sings its song? All right. So actually, this is an invitation. It's not a purification. It's an invitation for something that needs some purification. Or another way of saying it is that something inside has popped a pimple, but that you have those kind of pimples.
Yeah.
But this one got popped at a time when you're not expecting it to get popped, like walking into the boss's office. In this particular case, there was no boss's office to walk in on, but something triggered it.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? The answer is you're going to be, if you practice correctly, you'll be developing the skills to be able to see that stuff. But after it comes up, the question is, how do you deal with it after it comes up? The answer is, as you were saying, you deep breathe into it, you examine it, you look at it, try to inspect it to see what it is, and you recognize, oh, this is familiar enough. I've seen this before. You could almost find a label for it. Here's a few examples. Let's see if any of these fit. You could call it a panic attack.
Yeah, that was some. I had that thought. Maybe it was that. I don't know. I never, like in real life, I don't think I've ever had a panic attack. At least not that I would put that label on anything that ever happened to me. But that thought of panic came up.
Okay, so all we need to do is turn the volume down on the word panic to find a place where it does fit. In fact, it might be not a panic attack, but a panic whisper.
Yeah.
But what happened is that you were there for it. You saw it happen. You didn't quite see it happen as it began. You didn't see the seed of it. You don't see what kicked it off, but you caught it fairly early because you know that if it had gotten full blown, you would have probably been off with the cushion, maybe into the refrigerator or even into your car without even knowing where you were going or why, which happens when people are in full-blown panic attacks. They're so much into panic that they're not even aware of what's really they're doing or the effect that they're having, because all they can think of is, how do I get this feeling out of me?
Yeah.
And yet they don't even have the tools to do that. But you do.
Yeah. I was trying to just sit with it with equanimity and relaxation, like not trying to get rid of it as much as possible, to just like not stuff it back down where it came from, but like give it some space to do its thing. Because so in terms of what the reason for this coming up was, what it felt like to me was of just creating the circumstances or the conditions where it's possible for, it feels like it's just like kind of waiting just below the surface, and then it bubbles up whenever I don't kind of suppress it. That's what it feels like. just when some peace of mind, some quietness is there, that it kind of wants to come up.
Mm-hmm. How about the success of knowing that you can handle that? That, hey, that was just a panic attack. That's no big deal. I've had a panic attack or two before.
Yeah.
I'm a lion now. I'm not a victim of panic attacks anymore. Ha ha ha.
Yeah. It was like for a moment.
That's the new attitude. That's the new attitude, is to be the lion, the champion.
Yeah. So for a moment it was overwhelming, to the point where I had to like open my eyes for a second and reassure myself that I was safe, like that I wasn't on some like weird roller coaster or going off a cliff or something. But even though it was pretty intense, I managed to kind of keep pretty calm. So this didn't derail me or anything. Like I'm not trembling in my boots or anything, but it was pretty intense. So
some people have a different kind of an attack. And so they won't call it panic, but you were willing to use that word, and what you were talking about sounds like it. But there are other kinds of attacks that people have that are sometimes labeled as rapture or piti or kundalini or other sensations that arise in the body. And the real question, regardless of whether we call it panic attack or kundalini rising or whatever like that, is that can we find a way of enjoying this, because it's a kind of a new sensation, and we already have the self-confidence that we can manage it, that we can handle it, that's part of the knowledge. The knowledge is that I can handle these kind of things.
mm-hmm.
That's an important quality to have, because otherwise people will become fearful of their meditation. They don't know how to handle it. They become frightened that, oh no, things are going to get worse. And
Yeah.
sure enough, any teacher who's worse than anything will say, yes, they will. If that's your attitude, things are going to get worse. But if you can change your attitude, then the attitude is it doesn't matter what happens. You can handle it, and handle it nobly.
Yeah. Do you think there's a point in inviting these things to come up? Because in Shuladasa's system of the 10 stages, right around the stage where I think I'm at, it talks a lot about purifications and these like emotional things coming up. Because I think the way the reason he gives for that is that there's some stability of attention, there's some concentration building up. So with that kind of quality of stillness, some of the more subtle stuff can begin to emerge, kind of. And he talks about it as something very positive, that it can be healing in the way that like old entrenched habits can kind of come to the surface and kind of lose. I don't know how to put this, but like all the conditioning that we've accumulated, that this is a way of this like coming up and being, I don't know what happens to it exactly, but it's definitely seen as something positive, of like getting rid of all that conditioning to an extent.
All right. First off, you're not going to get rid of all of it.
Yeah.
Second is that, oh gosh, the only analogies that I can think of right now is facial blemishes. And facial blemishes are very much like what the word asapa means, or outflows, pimples, pus pockets. I don't know whether to go so far as to say a cyst or two or not. But here's the thing. is that those things can be pulled out with the right skill and the right preparation. But many people will leave their face infected and not do anything to get rid of the blackheads and the pimples.
Mm-hmm.
All right? So this is one of the ways of thinking about it. If you think about it like that, and I think that that's a very strange way of doing it, but now that I put together, I can see perhaps the Buddha was talking about it like that, because that's what the word asava means. Cankers, outflows, as opposed to fetters, which are more like bondages. Okay, so what we're doing now then is we're saying that these things are kind of under the surface, but that with right mindfulness and right inspection, we can see that stuff just staring us right in the face sometimes.
Yeah.
We look right at that pimple. We say, hey, get out of there. Out, 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 out. The question is, do we have the proper technique to pull that thing out? So that's one of the ways of looking at it. The answer is that if you do have the right skill, part of the right skills are to be able to see these things as they come up, because a lot of people can't. Something can actually get sore on the face, and they know that it's sore and it's tender, but they don't do anything about it for some reason or another. They just leave it sore. And the dermatologist's office, by the way, is full of the people who do want to do something about it.
Yeah.
All right. So if you look at it from that perspective, what's really going on is, by sitting quietly in meditation, that some of this stuff that's right under the surface of the mind, especially if we're able to clean the surface level stuff of the hindrances, then stuff that's from the past will kind of bubble up.
Yeah.
But it also bubbles up much more likely to be bubbling up emotionally than it is just a stray memory.
Yeah.
Okay? And that the way to deal with it is to let it come up and let it destroy itself, literally. Let it be a popper. And that you take a deep breath and let it slide. Because the only other possibility is trying to stuff it back in this hole and hope that it will go away, and it's not going to do that. All right, so that's a kind of way of looking at these things that fits very, very well, by the way, with the way that Culadasa describes it. So that these things are kind of under the surface, but they're kind of under the surface for everybody. But sometimes they come to the surface and people don't have the skills to deal with it.
Yeah.
And they want to, but they don't have the skills. Or they will go to a psychologist or a medical doctor or all kinds of things, but they don't have the skills themselves. Hopefully, if they go to the right kind of teacher, the teacher's going to teach them how to deal with this stuff.
Yeah. I've had the experience before of just I think pure emotion coming up, where it's just the emotion, and for me it was sadness coming up, seemingly out of nowhere, and then vanished, like getting more intense, and then ebbing and disappearing. And within like 20 seconds or so, it came out of nowhere, really intense, and then went away again. So that happened a couple of times. But yeah, I'm not sure whether I should seek that out or whether I should just wait for it to happen. Like, is it beneficial to actually seek it out? So to kind of drag it into daylight, so to speak.
The answer is kind of strange. First off, let me tell it like this. The kind of experience that you're talking about is a common experience in meditation retreats. That people will start to deal with issues they thought they had dealt with years ago, and or emotional states that feel unfamiliar until they inspect them and they recognize, oh no, that's a feeling that's very common. I know that one well, and I have been pushing it away because I don't like it, and now it's really staring me in the face.
Yeah.
Why? Because the mind is now empty enough, and so that vacuum space of the empty mind is where all that stuff pops into place. And that's exactly what we want to do if the students are trained well enough. And the one phrase that's good enough with that is never mind, start again. That's all the students need to know, is to let that stuff come popping up to the surface as if time alone in 5-second increments was going to wash the stuff right off the surface, and it just washes away because we're not hanging on to it anymore. And so that happens often in meditation retreats. Goenka calls it Sankara, and that it's emotional Sankara as well as bodily Sankara. Bodily Sankara comes up in the forms of aches and pains of the body, knees and tendons and pelvises and butts and things like that hurt, backs. But these emotional pains come up, and the students sometimes, or actually almost never, do they understand what triggered it. But if they're sitting there long enough, it'll get triggered again, and this time they'll kind of see it, or at least half see the triggering as well as the event. And the third or fourth time it goes up, and say, "Aha! I see you now. I've got you.
Yeah.
I can see what that trigger is." So that's the way of practicing. But when it comes up at the time when you don't know what to do about it, the answer is do the easy anapanasati. Take a deep breath, breathe into it, almost as if, think of it like this. Even if you're talking about doing samatha with Culadasa's style, still he will probably tell you that if you fall off of the ladder, if you're climbing to a certain point and then you fall off, then you have to start again. And the beginning of his practice is exactly the same as the beginning of ours, and that is taking a deep breath, come back to the present moment, and start again.
Yeah.
All right. Now, one of the things that I was starting to talk about in the beginning of the beginning of this talk was the kind of knowledge that we need, and that the kind of knowledge about how to deal with these things that we've been talking about that the society normally has is exactly not the knowledge that we have with the Buddha. And so these three knowledges that have to be developed, the first one is personality view, that we have to come to understand that the body is not the self, that feelings are not the self, that consciousness, perception, all of my memory base, none of that stuff is a self. Nothing there is permanent. Once we come to understand that, I think, in fact, possibly the outcry would be, I've been lied to. Because once we come to the understanding that there is actually no self, you recognize that everything that works with society works because people believe that there's a self that can be controlled. If I've got a self, then I'm under somebody else's thumb. This is what the Buddha means by Silabhata Paramasa, but we have to look at it from several different perspectives, and one of them is positive things. Let me give you an idea of what I mean by a few positive things. One positive thing would be marriage, in the sense that it's supposed to bind two people together for life, right? But it fails. It's not a very good example, but it is some positive thing. Another positive would be going to church on Sunday. Another positive one would be taking Jesus as your Savior. What these really are things that people do in order to please other people, not because they're inherently good in and of themselves as actual good actions. In that regard, they can be called ceremonies or rituals, things that are done for the effect rather than as a cause.
Yeah.
The marriage is supposed to be a cause. The marriage is supposed to cause these two people to stay together the rest of their lives. Fat chance.
Yeah.
But it winds up being nothing but an effect, the effect of the pressure from the society. All right, most rituals are like that. One of the most expensive is the funeral. The effect of a funeral is to be that people have less grief. They've said goodbye to Grandpa. But it winds up with more grief because they still have the grief for Grandpa and a big bill for the funeral.
Yeah. It doesn't achieve the intended effect.
Doesn't achieve the intended things, but it has unintended consequences. This is what we mean by positive rituals or positive rules, positive laws. But when we recognize that the whole society was set up for exploitation.
Yeah.
The whole society was set up for exploitation. And so in that regard, that means that now that I can see that in relationship to no self means not susceptible to the laws of those who cling to a self have. We've got to find a new way to live. That new way to live is the Eightfold Noble Path. That new way is the way of suffering and no suffering. It's the way of wisdom rather than the way of following the rules. You could almost go so far as to see that in regular society by saying that we have to give kids a bunch of rules so that they'll know how to behave, because they don't. But soon enough, they ought to know how to behave, and so we don't have to give them any rules. Now, that's the kind of society we want. It's a society that's free of rules because everybody in society is wise enough to know how to behave themselves. But we're not up to that level, not as a society yet.
Yeah.
The question is, can you be? Can you be that lion? Do you have the strength? Do you have the courage? Do you have the character to follow the path of the Buddha, knowing that it's a path that takes, and it's the only path that will take one out of suffering?
Yeah.
So that's an important quality, to recognize these three things. And these are the three fetters, or the three outflows, or the three big points, is personality view, and understand that you are not what you thought you were. Therefore, you are not subject to the rules the way that you thought you were. That in fact, you do not feel like you want to be exploited by those rules. You want to find a better way to live. And that better way is the knowledge and vision of what is and what is not the path. In fact, the knowledge and vision of what is not the path is following everybody else's rules. You're going to have to find your own rules for yourself. This is part of being a real Dhamma dude, a real lion, is you don't even follow the rules of your teacher. You have to make up your own.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out for yourself, but you've got the tools to do that. That's the important quality, is that you have that self-confidence, that you can trust, that you can find your own way, because you've got this wisdom that we've already been practicing, of noble right view, of noble right intention, or right action, or right attitude is the word that I like. We have the right sati, to remember. We have that inspection quality of right view. And that the hard part, if we're going to play victim for a moment long enough to use the word hard, the hard part is the right effort. To find just the right effort, as you were talking about, finding just the right touch.
Yeah. Yeah, I recently talked to someone and they framed it as getting the aperture just right. Like on a camera, like not zooming in too much, not standing away so much. So getting a good balance there. I like that
That's
metaphor.
exactly what the Buddha was talking about with the middle path. That's it. Another way of talking about it is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
All right. And there's also a kind of a sweet spot in the mind that the Buddha talks about, and that's that first jhana. So when you talk about samadhi, I'm curious about what that means, as opposed to, in fact, there's no real distinction or difference between samatha and vipassana, because real samatha requires vipassana in order to get that peaceful state. That peaceful state is, in fact, right mindfulness, right unremitting mindfulness, unremitting investigation, unremitting effort that winds up being energy, unremitting joy. That's what gives that unremitting peace, or that unremitting tranquility that the Buddha talks about. And you can only reach that samatha by going through the various stages that you need to, but you can touch it from time to time easily enough. But the unremitting quality is not going to be there until you already have the unremitting joy. Also, the word samatha is commonly transferred or translated as Sumati, and then they automatically start thinking about it in terms of jhana. All right. The way that I look at jhana is, it can either be something that's attempted and tried and attempted and worked on and finally achieved, or it can be a natural outcome of correct practice. And the outcome of correct practice means that we're, in a way, if we've already gone deep enough into the Dhamma to have finished off with the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, we've got the fruit of Sotapan 100% down, and we're sitting there with nothing left to do. Why not do the jhanas? That's the second way to do it. The first way to do it is to struggle.
Yeah.
All right. And so in this regard, I would recommend that the jhanas be done when the skills are developed and the time is there to do it, because the proper work that needed to be done has been done. Think about it like this, that you're a slave. And if you don't pick cotton, you're going to have to suffer at sundown. And here you are over in the field, Patty, picking flowers, and it's late in the afternoon. All right? And you say, well, I like these flowers, but I know I'm going to be suffering soon, but I like the flowers. All right? So that's actually one of the ways of looking at it. It's better to go get the work done that needs to be done so that we can be free from suffering.
Yeah.
And I do not see a distinction between samatha and vipassana. I see them as something that work hand in hand together.
Yeah. I guess
And
it's a
that the sutras talk about it like that also.
yeah. I guess it's a matter of how you frame it, and I think especially in the way Chuladasa does it, and I'm by no means an expert, but that's the conclusion I've come to, is that he emphasizes samatha in the beginning, and then in the later stages, there are more like explicit insight practices. Whereas in the beginning, it's all about stable attention and strong awareness. And
Well, in that case, then he's just labeling something that as samatha that I wouldn't label as samatha. He's talking about first jhana just like I am. He's just using a word about it differently.
okay, yeah,
And neither one of us have justification in the sutras for how we're using the word.
yeah,
You hear that? Neither one of us have justification in the sutras for how he's using the word.
and in the end, it doesn't really matter as long as we're clear on what we're talking about, right?
Exactly. That's the important thing, that it's not wrapped up in the
Yeah,
words. It's wrapped up in getting the mind fit for work.
yeah. So I think one of the important points. I mean, you stressed again, right, noble effort, and I think one of the problems I've been having is um, overemphasizing effort or efforting in the wrong way, which is more a way of maybe straining instead of right effort. And I think um, I've been having a wrong idea of what effort, what the correct application of effort is. And to me, it feels like I really need to ease up on effort, which I guess is probably easing up on wrong effort. So, um,
Effort that's not noble.
yeah,
Okay, and let's start developing a noble effort. And a noble effort has the quality of willingness and the feeling of success behind it, to where the other kind is it's a kind of a mentality of get or done from the lower classes, that we can struggle through this. We can get her done, but don't think of yourself as the one who's down actually moving the boulder. Think of yourself as the mobile who's sitting on the horse, watching the work get done.
yeah,
Allow deeper parts of yourself to actually do the heavy lifting.
yeah. That's what it actually feels like if I do it more in this other way, where it's more of a watching things happen. It's like an automatic process that happens, and I just witness it in that sense.
Exactly. That's excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah, I think that the way I've been doing it is almost trying to force the mind to stay on the object of uh, of meditation, to stay on the breath, and it's kind of it does work to some extent, but it doesn't work well, and not for a long time, and not in the correct way, I think.
And it leads a bit to disappointment.
Yeah,
All right. To where if we're not particularly intending to force the mind on the breath all the time, but just resting there gently, then when it wanders away, then we can gently bring it back. That's the attitude to have.
yeah,
Oh, okay. And in fact, this might be something that you can use is think of the mind as a toddler. We don't want it to wander too far away, but we want
yeah,
to give it enough freedom to go exploring.
yeah,
And here's the reason for that is that because we want the mind to be fit for work, to fit to inspect. So we need to give the mind some freedom. So in the beginning, we give the mind quite a lot of freedom. The only freedom that we don't give it is that you cannot wander so far away that you lose sight of the breath.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now the analogy makes more sense. Yeah.
And so when you lose sight of the breath, you bring it back to the breath. But between breaths, even though we're going to know an in breath and an out breath, there is all kinds of things to happen, including anxiety attacks.
Yeah. I think just the idea I've had of how much effort to apply and what that feels like has been very, very heavily skewed on the side of too much effort. So
You're a Westerner. I don't expect anything else from you.
yeah, it feels like I need to like just apply the lightest intention, just like barely inclining the mind, whereas previously I was whacking it with a baseball bat.
I know. Please don't do that.
Yeah, just by comparison, that's what it feels like. I mean, I wasn't intending to do that.
How can you enjoy your meditation with a baseball bat?
Yeah, I mean,
Right?
previously, before that, I was whacking it with like a wrecking ball. So I guess the
Good. I'm
baseball
glad
bat
that
was
you're letting up. That's good. Yeah, lighten up a little bit. In fact,
that was
lighten up
already
more
a step up. So yeah, but now it feels like I'm doing almost nothing. It's just like a little feather poking it in the right direction.
It's very good to remember this one, and I found it in many places, and in the Dhammapada and it's in the Majjhima Nikaya, two places that I know of. And that is that the teaching of the Buddha is good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good in the end. All right, with the right tones and phrases. So the reason that we want that to be important is because the students quite often practice in a way that is not beneficial in the sense of the enjoyment. So if you're practicing correctly, the benefit is self-evident. The benefit is self-evident. This is so nice. No place to go and nothing to do, and everything is just so good. And when anything that comes up from the past and I see it, I can say, I don't have to think about that anymore. That's old business. And so we can begin to enjoy life. And you can begin to enjoy life right from the beginning. That's the whole point of this practice is, you can sit down and have a little Dhammarato moment right now. Your first day of practice.
Yeah.
But you can also see how the rites, rules, rituals, way to do things, the society's ways, how deep they've been ingrained into your mind.
Yeah.
That look at all of the negative language that's used around the way that we're talking here. One would be lazy. All right, get off your lazy butt and do something. Why should I do anything?
Yeah. Yeah, I suspect that plays a role in how I've been conceiving of effort as well. I mean, it's a pretty obvious connection, and I mean, to the extent that it's been ingrained deeply, it now feels like I almost have to do the opposite because I've been so far on the one side that to get back to the middle means going a pretty long way. You know what I mean? Like the the attitude of really that get things done mentality of like get some work done has, I think, been skewed pretty far in one direction for me.
I know. It's a your particular pocket of that culture is particularly this way.
Yeah.
And I understand that. So this is a kind of a new way of thinking, especially when you begin to recognize that that other way of thinking is actually suffering. And so when you can see that as suffering, you can say, oh, I don't have to do it that way. I can take the easy way out. But that takes wisdom to take the easy way out, because everything that you've been taught is, oh, you can't, there is no easy way out. There is no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah, it's all hard work all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so we wind up making meditation, which in fact is nothing but the Buddha's way of relaxing, and we make it hard work.
Yeah. I mean, I thought I was over this because I had a very similar realization before, and either I just slipped right back into the old way, or I'm just peeling away layer after layer of more of the same stuff. And
I would say that it's the peeling back of the layers. That's a good way to think about it. And the reason for that is because that's the way a lion would do it. Let's take that stuff out one at a time. Yeah, there's another one. Oh, another one. All right, we'll get that one too.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a one-off thing where you just see it once and then you're done. I think it's more of a continuously seeing it play out in different ways.
Right, that's what we mean by having the skill of the path, which is that right attitude. Things are going to keep coming up for a while. And when they do, let's grab it and deal with it joyfully.
Yeah.
And from time to time, one of the things that's going to come up is, I really want to work hard at this.
Yeah.
And so when you see that, because if you don't look at it, you don't see it, you can get stuck right back into it as a habit. Then you have to have a reminder, wait a minute, wake up, wake up, wake up. So the question is, can you see yourself doing it as you putting yourself to sleep, so that you can say, wait a minute, I'm not going to go into that right now again. That was exactly the same thing that I was asking you at the beginning when you were talking about a little panic attack. Did you see what kicked that off? Because that's what we need to do, is to see how these things get kicked off. Because where they get kicked off is at the level of feelings. It's a feeling that gets kicked off.
Yeah.
And so a feeling somehow of not liking that might have had a thought behind it, and so the thought and then the feeling, and now the feeling, it quickly explodes into an anxiety attack because it was not seen wisely. If you'd seen it wisely, you'd say, oh, I've seen that before.
Yeah, I need to do it a couple more times. Get some routine.
All right, well, be on guard for it. That's the right way to say. Be on guard for it. So as soon as it arises, you'll know it.
Yeah. I'm actually, I'm leaving for retreat today for 10 days. So I'll have plenty of chances to put that into practice right away.
Okay. Remind me of where you're going again.
It's I don't think it's anything you'd know of, but it's mostly a metta retreat. It's mostly based around metta.
Yes, we talked about that. Yes, we've had a long chat on metta also.
Yeah. I think I can incorporate a lot of these things into the metta practice as well. I think there's some good overlap there.
Metta is joy. Joy is metta.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really looking forward.
How can you possibly do something as silly as go through a ritual that says may all beings be happy if you don't have any happy?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's going to be 10 days. I'm going to be reporting back after that and how it went. But
Excellent.
I'm pretty confident because I was having some worries and doubts before, but I feel up to it. I feel ready for it.
I'm glad you do. I'm sure you're up for it.
Yeah.
I'm sure when little things come up, you can catch them so that you can go back and just enjoy watching the breath without trying to hang on to it too hard.
Yeah.
Well, good. How long is the retreat going to last?
It's going to be 10 days.
10 days. Okay. Well, give me a call when you finish with it.
All right, sure. It's going to be, I think, 6th or 7th of January then. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure the world will still be here when you come back.
I hope so. Yeah, nothing I can do about it anyway.
I don't think that I don't think that Trump can blow up the world right now. The government's closed down.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of as well. Don't let him do too many stupid things.
Hey, it's up to him. I'm just a spectator here.
All right, good.
Okay, well, we'll see you.
Thanks so much.
Enjoy your retreat.
Thank you.
Have a really happy, good retreat.
I will. All right, see you.